So this will probably be a short one because this is a short novella. This is How You Lose the Time War. So I've heard about this one. It's won a lot of awards, I think. I don't know which awards it's won, but it's really good. It's really interesting. It's written by these two people who, from my understanding, each write a perspective of one of the characters, and they sort of go back and forth, writing these letters to each other as authors, but these letters are the letters written by the characters in the book. So let me just get my notes. Just to sum up the whole thing, it's one big, I said it's one big Mobius strip of time, wrapping two characters from opposing factions into a time loop of love that allows them both to break free of this conflict and spend their existence together. So let me just straighten this out a bit. So we got these two characters, red and blue, which I would have used a cardinal and a blue jay because I don't know what kind of bird this is. But anyways, these two characters called red and blue. Blue, they are agents working for these sort of societies, agencies who are fighting this time war against each other. So time, there are many different strands in the fabric of time. These strands, you can go up strand, which is into the past, or down strand, which is into the future. And there's all these different timelines that these two entities are fighting against each other, trying to sort of have each of these strands weave together into this braid that will best serve their future purposes and give them the future they want. So we have Red, who's from sort of this technocratic, post-human corpo future, like sort of your classic sci-fi far future agency. And then we have Blue, who is an agent for this this sort of biopunk. They're called Garden. They're harder to explain. They're like a communal hive, not hive mind, but like one mind entity that's all about growth and sort of long term and life and biology and those sort of adjectives. And so the format's interesting. So it's a very short chapter, just a couple pages, describing the events that this character is currently experiencing, from either the perspective of Red or the perspective of Blue, immediately followed by a letter that character finds written by the opposite person. So if we have a chapter about Red doing something, then Red will come across a letter written by Blue, and then it will be the letter written by Blue. At the end of the letter, it will go to the next chapter, which will be Blue's perspective. And then Blue will find a letter written by Red, and we'll read the letter by Red, then we'll go back to Red's perspective. And it does that throughout the whole book. So they started as sort of enemies taunting one another. Like they find a letter and they think, oh, it could be a trap, it could be some sort of mind-altering thing that could keep me in a lot of trouble. But they decide to read it for curiosity's sake, and it's sort of taunting, like, hey, I know you're on the other side, an agent, like, we're gonna win the war, you're not gonna win it. And then so they write a letter back, and they keep writing letters back and forth. And sort of the medium that they use to write the letters, it's not literally pen on paper, although it is sometimes. But because they don't want their sort of superiors to find out that they are communicating with the enemy, they come up with very complicated, very intricate ways of sharing these letters, like boiling a glass of water, and the bubbles sort of have a code in them that corresponds to the letter, or something in DNA, or something in the pattern of birds, or it's all like these intricate codes, which is it's really cool. So yeah, so they started as enemies taunting each other, but it ends in a love story. Eventually, they sort of form a connection, which is it's really interesting to see them sort of. I mean, even the word love doesn't seem to match it, because they're so different, and they never actually meet each other, but they know enough about each other from fighting against each other and from these letters, and so yeah, they do fall in love by the end of it. And then there's this mysterious, the only sort of I mean, there's the threat that they could get caught, that they're sort of chatting with the enemy. But there's also this mysterious seeker. So at the end of every letter, um, they'll like destroy or dispose of the letter, and then there's this like mysterious seeker thing will come and sort of gobble up the remains of the letter, however it was formed, and take it into themselves. And I should have seen it coming a mile away, but I'm thinking like, oh, it's some of the higher ups from one of the two agencies who's on their trail and knows that they're sharing letters and they're going to be outed. But it turns out in the end that this seeker is actually Red, from Red's subjective future, going back in time to gather as much into them about Blue, like all the letters written to and from Blue. And why she does that, um, because at the end of this, um, the sort of higher ups notice that Red and Blue are close to each other in the web of time, not their actual relationship, and says like, okay, Red, you have to write a letter to Blue, make contact with Blue, but it's going to be a poison letter that will kill them. And so Red has no choice but to write the letter, but before Red does, she tells Blue, do not read my next letter, it will kill you. And so she sends the letter, and then Blue gets this letter, this poison letter, knows it's a poison letter, but is like, if I don't read it, they'll know that Red's compromised and had told me not to read it, and they'll kill Red. So I have to read it, sacrifice myself so that Red will live. And so she does this, and so this poison that Red is immune to, because Red's it's from Red's side, kills Blue because Blue it infects Blue. So Red's plan is to go back in time and inoculate Blue against this letter, so that when Blue does read the letter, she will not be poisoned by it. And earlier, Blue mentions that because there's sort of this weird communal one mind thing, but Blue's sort of off on her own and as an agent, because when she was a child, she had been infected by an enemy agent and been cut off from Garden. But then when sort of no symptoms came of it, she was brought back into the fold. So that sort of sets her apart, and that's why she's different, working on her own as an agent. But it turns out her being infected by an enemy agent, that was Red. So Red this whole time is going through seeking all these letters, taking them all into herself, to that sort of get the sort of essence of Blue as much as she can into her, which allows her to penetrate into Garden's innermost sanctum, where Blue actually is in the past as a child, and infects Blue with this Red's side poison, inoculating Blue against the poison, so that later in life, when Blue gets poisoned by Red's poison letter, Blue does not die. And so it's one big time loop. But there's also another time loop in that when Red was a child, she had gone to this planet, this totally desolate planet, and just wanted to be alone for a bit. And she tells this story. And then later on in the book, one of Blue's missions is to go to this planet and take out this agent, this enemy agent. And so she goes there and realizes it's Red as a child. And so this like plant thing's gonna erupt to the ground and kill Red, but as it does, Blue attacks it and kills it and saves Red's life without Red knowing. So both Red and Blue are so intertwined temporally that they had saved each other's lives as children. And I mean, you want to talk about paradoxes? Yeah, you can't. Anything to do with time, you can't talk about paradoxes, because there are going to be so many interweave. Because like if Red hadn't have saved Blue, then Blue wouldn't have been able to save Red, and then Red wouldn't have been around to save Blue. And like I said, it's one big crazy Mobius strip of time of these two people who are so interlinked but on totally different sides. And so it ends with Red being sort of imprisoned by their side, because of what they did at the end. After they poisoned Blue, they sort of went rogue and like went through all these times to like gather in all this stuff about Blue and then break into the Garden. So that's known. So Red's currently imprisoned. Like, why did you break into Garden? Are you working for Garden? Blah blah blah. And at the very end, one of the prison guards, it turns out, is Blue, because Blue had been inoculated and did not die from the poison. So it came back and saved Red and they both escape and sort of live happily ever after. Sort of these two enemies, now not one joining the other side, but both of them stepping away from this time war and sort of creating something better. Because these two opposing ideals and ideologies coming together, yeah. And so that's the main gist of the story. It's really short, but it didn't take me a long time to read. I took a long time to read it because it's very dense in a good way. There's so much packed into it, almost like a short story. There's lots of cultural references, both like modern and classical, that a lot of them will sort of pass you by. I just happened to have read Ozymandias like the day before I read this line about trunkless legs of stone. I was like, oh, that's the line from that poem. Wow. Um, look on my mighty works, or look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Yeah, so there's lots of really fun references in it. The prose is very purple. It's borderline poetic, but I think it works because the chapters are so short, and it's very lots of imagery, and it's neat the different settings because you have post future with starships and space and planets, and then you have the past and you have like Genghis Khan and you have Socrates and you have sort of the Iroquois Confederacy in the 17th century and just all these different settings and yeah, the language is just it's beautiful. I have been ether flooding the void between stars, tangling their breath into networks of songs. I have been fish and plankton and hummus, all of these have been me. But while I've been enmeshed in this wholeness, they are not the whole of me. The thought of your disembodied network. So like that's sort of the language, and some of the later letters, the love language in it is just beautiful. Um, I mean, it literally says, "I veer rhapsodic, my prose purples. Maybe I don't think you'll laugh, or if you do, the laughter would delight me. Maybe I've overread the simple word with which you close your letter, the word being love. But I can never overread you, and the word you chose is not simple. Maybe I overstep your bounds, and to be honest, love confuses me." It's just a beautiful book. Yeah. So that was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar. I'm gonna say that's pronounced it. Max Gladstone. Yeah. I think this is how you win the time war. Very cool book.